Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Jan's beautiful gallery in Summerland, British Columbia. My era of prop master and assistant prop master come from a time pre-internet where you had to work the phones to try and find things. You had to get in your car and drive sometimes hundreds, even thousands of miles to see something, to see if it was worth having in the film. It really was an adventurous time that way. And when I was doing Legends of the Fall, Jimmy Chow, the property master, was tasked with finding 5 firing German World War I field guns or cannons. And he turned to Neil McLeod, property master Neil McLeod, and myself, and put us in charge of that, amongst all the other things we were doing with the film. So from my book, I'm going to read about finding those cannons. In a movie full of challenges, one of the biggest was when Jimmy was tasked with putting together a battery of 5 firing German cannons for the battlefield. He turned that search over to Neil and me. Neil searched the USA, and I looked in Canada. This is still pre-internet, so we were working the phone, and in my case, the highways of Alberta, British Columbia, and Saskatchewan. The first call I made was to the National War Museum in Ottawa, Ontario. I naively introduced myself to the World War I expert and said I was looking for 5 firing German cannons for our movie. I received an arrogant 5-minute lecture on how impossible that would be because every liberated German cannon brought to Canada had cement poured down the barrel so it could never be used again against Canada. According to him, I was out of luck. Neil, on the other hand, was having some success in the USA, as the early German cannons in World War I were very similar to Civil War cannons. Within a couple of weeks, he had found 3 cannons, 2 in Georgia and 1 in California. I was still struggling in my quest, and I felt defeated whenever I pulled up to a cenotaph or a small town museum in my quest to find the final 2 cannons. With about a month to go, I was about to tell Jimmy that I could not find the final 2 when a chance conversation with the owner of Crown Surplus in Calgary, Gordon Cumming, led me to try one last place. Gordon told me that about 20 years prior, he had seen a German Krupp 77 cannon in a Legion Hall in a little town of Gleason, Alberta. Over the past 2 months, I had been to so many small town Legion Halls because of people thinking they saw something that I could have easily dismissed this suggestion and moved on. But Gordon's store is one of the best surplus stores in the world. When I got back to the office, I called the Gleason Legion and I got a barmaid on the phone with a 2-cigarette pack a day voice. I did my polite introduction and asked if they had a Krupp 77. A what, she asked? I quickly realized my mistake. A cannon. I heard you have a cannon. Well, there's some old gun in here, she said. I asked if I could come and see it the following day. She said she would have the head of the Legion meet me. I had no expectations, but it was the last place I was going to try, as I was falling behind on setting up the big tent distribution area for the battle scenes. The next morning, with Jimmy's permission, I traveled 2 hours southeast to Gleason. When I walked into the Legion Hall, my jaw dropped. Sitting there in rough shape, but with a barrel that had not been cemented, was a Krupp 77. When I met the Legion manager, I laid out my plan. The movie had a budget of $5,000 to rent the cannon. We would have it restored by the Canadian Military Munitions Shop in Calgary and then get a wheelwright to repair the wheels. We would then return it in 3 months in new condition. So, you're going to give us $5,000 to fully restore the cannon to new condition and return it in 3 months? The old Legion manager asked. When I affirmed it was true, he smiled. Well, hell, do you want the other one? The other one, I asked. I followed him outside to a shed. In the back was an identical Krupp 77 with an open barrel under some lumber and a tarp. I was stunned. I called Jimmy in Calgary and said, I found them. So that Legion Hall closed many years after the fact. And when I went back to Calgary in 2007 to do the movie Passchendaele, I hadn't thought about the Gleason guns in a long time, as I called them, and I was walking through the Calgary War Museum because I was going to their archives to look at a Passchendaele battlefield map that we were going to recreate for the film. When I turned and looked, sitting there was one of the Krupp 77s in their Vimy Ridge display. The young museum director, who was probably in elementary school when we did Legends of the Fall, looked at that and he said, "Isn't that the most beautiful artifact cannon you've ever seen?" I said, yeah. I said, do you know about that cannon? He goes, all I know is it came from a defunct legion. I said, no, here's the story of the cannon. And I told him. Anyway, have a lovely day, everybody.